Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Leaders In and Leaders in Business. Ronan has held many senior leadership positions here in the UK. Most recently, prior to his initial one, he was the CFO for O2. He's also held positions like the head of strategic finance over at Gell. But we all know he's currently the CEO of O2 Telefonica, which is, whether it's number one or number two, it's certainly the biggest brand as a mobile operator. O2's got 23 million customers. He's done a phenomenal job at building that organization. He's a pioneer in both customer experience, customer insight, and organizational excellence. He'll also be very pleased to know that, according to our research, The Independent said in March of this year that he, quote, oozes with Irish charm. So we're looking forward to seeing something like that. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Ronan to the stage. Ronan, welcome.
Thank you. Well, I can confirm there was at least one thing that was true about Anthony's introduction, so let me see if I can prove the Irish charm. So, good afternoon, everybody, and firstly, let me thank Anthony for the opportunity and Leaders In to come and speak to you today. As Anthony said, my role is the CEO of Telefonica UK, better known to most of you as O2. And I thought it would be nice just to share a little bit about me and a little bit about O2, and then with Anthony we can explore some of the themes as he described. So a bit about me. My background is in finance, but there is life after finance for those of you who may be in that space. So I trained as a chartered accountant in Ireland, and then I came to the city in the 80s when the city was just exploding with deregulation and everything going on there. So I started in banking, and then I worked in B2B companies in environmental services and then in logistics at Gell before discovering the pleasures of B2C and the love of brands on joining O2 right at its moment of creation, just as it was being demerged from BT back in 2001. Maybe a word on O2, and again, and it's not false humility. My part in O2 is a small part, but a proud one. I think it's fair to say that O2 is rightly identified as a case study in the transformation of a business. Let's be honest about it, who remembers BT Cellnet? It's also a case study in the development of one of Britain's most powerful brands and the delivery of consistent market outperformance through a relentless focus on the customer, both customer insight and customer experience. And I have to say, for me personally, it's been a real privilege to both learn and in recent years to lead in this incredibly diverse and dynamic and exciting and sometimes complex and frustrating industry that we operate in. A word on leadership. I think for everybody, leadership is and should be different, because ultimately for leadership to be successful, it must be authentic. But a few of the things that maybe I've learned and that work for me, I think the key is, once you understand your purpose, is then to inspire and enable in equal measure. You know, when I was appointed the CEO at O2, I stood in the atrium in front of our colleagues and described my job as chief cheerleader and chief storyteller. And I still think that is the best description of my role. And I think to achieve success in that, what I try to do is I try to focus on, for me, what are the three key constituencies: our customers, our people, and our responsibility to society, and then align each of those under that single unifying purpose of wanting to make a difference, and for me, wanting to make a difference by helping people to be the success that they deserve to be. So if I touch very briefly on those three elements. For customers, as Anthony said, as a brand and a paid-for brand, we serve more customers in the UK than any other brand in any category. But it's really important for a business that serves 23 million customers to be consistently in touch with the customer, not just as your role as a service provider, but actually be in touch with your customers in all aspects of their lives. So whether that be the fact that they're suffering in the recession, whether it be the fact that they're tired of suffering in the recession and want some escapism and some enjoyment, whether they want to celebrate with London and with Britain in the success of the Olympics, it's really important that we're in touch with all of those things, because at the end of the day, The reason why we're relevant is your remote control for your life is your mobile phone. And that wasn't something that I first said, but Hans Schnuck back in the day with Orange. So for me, there's no better way to keep in touch in that way than through social media. I'm one of the CEOs who is actually on Twitter, and they are my tweets for good or ill, not anybody else's. So I set aside some time during the day, every day, and much sometimes to the annoyance of my colleagues, always last thing at night, just to check in, see what's on the feed, see what people are saying on Twitter and on the blogs, and just make sure that we're staying in touch. The second thing I talked about was our people. People are hugely important to us. I think one of the key elements of our differentiation as a business is our people. And as a result, we're very demanding of them in relation to the quality and level of service and the consistency of it that we deliver, but also in terms of the spirit of innovation around our people and how our people contribute. And one of the things we've been pioneering this year, particularly talking to people in both public and private sector and the enterprise space, is solutions for business to allow people to work more flexibly. But the big insight that we've drawn from that, and one of the things that I'm personally trying to drive behind that, is the reality is that technology and the pace of technological change has fast outpaced the pace of behavioural change, and the opportunity to get the benefit out of both technology and flexible working is now focusing on behaviour, and that's what I try and focus my attention on. You know, it requires line managers to change how they do things. No longer can you manage on an inputs basis, you have to manage on an outputs basis. And good old-fashioned management by line of sight doesn't really apply, doesn't really cut it anymore. And then society. As those of you who know a little bit about Telefonica and O2, you will know that we share an equal passion for society and the impact that we, both as a brand and an organisation, can have on some of the challenges and opportunities of society. And the one area that I'm particularly focused on is how we engage young people, and to ensure that young people can make the contribution to both society and the economy that they're capable of doing, particularly focusing on bridging the gap between employers and young people in relation to digital skills, where the reality is that many NEETs have more innate digital skills than those who are in the workforce. So there's a real opportunity for us to make a difference. And of course, in a business like ours, we have real practical experience because 20% of our people are below the age of 25. How else did you think I learned how to tweet? So with that, that's just a little overview. Let me pause at this stage, and with Anthony, we can maybe explore in a bit more detail.
Ronan, thank you very much indeed, sir, for that. If we could just start by what I call the quick fire round. Sure. Just to get to know the person behind these CEOs and get to know you a little bit more personally. First of all, just short answers. Favourite restaurant in London?
Hakkasan.
Expensive noodles, but it is good. It's very good.
Excellent.
What do you like to do to relax at the weekend?
Two things. My daughter, who's now 19, just gone to university, is a hockey player, hockey goalkeeper, and so most of my weekends for the last 10 years have been watching her play at least 2 hockey games. Now that she's gone to university, I get a chance to play golf.
Fantastic. And out of those 2, does she do pretty good at winning?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah.
It's your leadership and coaching, I'm sure. Yeah. What do people say, just out of interest, final one on this, but when Ronan Dunne is at a sort of evening dinner party and somebody says, Ronan, so what do you do? And you say, I'm the CEO of O2 Telefonica. What type of faces do you get or questions do you get asked?
Well, I suppose 2 quick thoughts. The first thing is, I never actually introduced myself by saying I'm the CEO of Telefonica.
It would be a bit presumptuous.
So I do. I always say I work at O2, and you know, Robert and I were just saying earlier, the industry is a fascinating one, so people are genuinely interested. So, and I hope nobody in the audience will be offended, but many of my colleagues who were in BT struggled with that dinner party question a lot more than when they moved to O2. And I do get lots of requests for going on my family and friends discount program.
Exactly.
See me afterwards, by the way.
Yeah. Are we all friends now? Right? We can call up there. Ronan, if we can, I didn't expect you to get any of those ones wrong, so that's good. If we can start now with, as you mentioned, leadership. It's fair to say that everybody in this room is ambitious. Not everybody maybe wants to be the CEO, but looking at some of the personal things that have got you to be as successful as you are and rise up through the ranks to your CEO position, what are some of the skills or attributes that you have that has enabled you to get so far in your career to date?
I think a couple of things. I think everybody learns on their feet, and probably the thing that I learned early on was that despite the fact that I think I am bright and capable, I can achieve a lot more by the impact I have on people around me than I can achieve on my own. And that was probably the biggest breakthrough. When I worked in the city, I was just telling Nicola this before we came in, I joined a team and I wanted to impress. So I worked Saturdays and Sundays when everybody else was at home, so the team would be ahead. And then I kind of worked out, unless I could invent an 8th day, I had to change my style. So then I focused on how I could impact the people around me, influence them, so that they could be more effective. And surprise, surprise, that was a real transformation for me. So I think that's the key, is understanding how you can have the most impact and recognizing that very often it's not by what you do, but how you influence what others do.
Yeah, so it's sort of the epiphany shift that you can only achieve so much, but you can achieve a lot more through other people.
Exactly.
Yeah. Ronan, if your child or your daughter came up to you and asked you not for money, but asked you for the best piece of leadership advice you can give, what would that be?
I think it's be clear on your purpose, how you can make that most impact, and then communicate.
Yeah. Okay. Through social media as well, and wherever it is and however it happens. Okay, very good. Ronan, I've got some insider information that you are both very good at going up to the sort of vision strategy level and looking at the very convoluted, complicated industry that you're in to work out the strategy for the organization, but you also can come down to the execution level at the runway and actually listen in on calls or do whatever you need to make sure things are happening as you would want them to do. As a CEO, how do you strike that balance between being up there and then being down here on the runway?
Well, I think to the answer to the previous question, if you want to be really clear on the impact you can make, I have a hypothesis that most questions, once you work out what they actually are relatively easy to solve. I think a lot of businesses spend a lot of time trying to work out what it is, the question that they are trying to solve. So what I try to do is stand back from the detail, go back to the 30,000 feet, and just see, are we really, really clear? What's the problem? What it is we're trying to solve? And then it's usually a lot clearer for me as to what's the role then I need to play. And to that point previously of communicating, then when you've got the fact pack right, then we're crystal clear in the way you communicate that out in the business.
Yeah. So in terms of communication, as you mentioned, it's communication. Presumably you'd insist that we all go off on a public speaking course. That would be a good thing for us to all do. What?
Not at all. It's the 30 seconds at the water cooler that can be as impactful as anything else. I think on the communicate, and I may misattribute, but I think it was probably Paul Polman was saying that for every layer in your organization, if you want to drive a cultural transformation, each layer will take a year and you just have to keep going and going. But I think, communication, yes, we use Yammer internally and we have very effective internal communications channel, but one-to-one conversations, that goes back to chief cheerleader and chief storyteller. Inspiring people through 30 seconds at the water cooler is probably the most powerful thing that any business leader can do.
Absolutely, yeah. Fantastic. Talking about that as well, I believe, it is a complicated industry. So you working out where the industry is going. I mean, we're in very fast-changing times, right? So everyone says that as an organisation, you have to be agile. You need to be able to adapt with, in your industry, customers and competitors can be the same thing sometimes. So with all of this thing, the whole industry moving so fast, are things like 5-year business plans out the window? I mean, you've got to create agility, but also you've got to set an execution and set a vision.
So I think probably most business people would admit that the outer years of any business plan are more in the fiction category than in the fact category. But I think the key is, what do you set out to do at the beginning of any plan, and holding your course on that element of your purpose. O2's role hasn't changed between 2G, 3G, and it won't change in 4G. It's about differentiation through insight and experience so that we enable for our customers, for them to get the best out of technology. A simple belief that the possibilities of technology should be open to all. Yeah. And our role then is to really focus on how we bring that to life for our customers. Yeah. And that, I think, does allow us to plan through in the longer term, even if the execution of that will change because of competitive dynamics or other things.
Yeah. Yeah. So that purpose, as you said, doesn't change. Yeah. O2 started off, Ronan, as pretty much from nothing. I mean, it had, right at the beginning, it was the underdog, the challenger. And so it was easy to have that hungry challenger mentality. But now, you've come all the way to the top. And again, however you look at it in numbers or whatever else, you're right at the top. You've got 23 million customers. So how do you maintain that hungry challenger mentality when you are that successful?
Well, I think you're right. At the start, I did a piece at Manchester Business School a few years ago, and I put up a chart and said, back in 2002, O2, or Cellnet at that stage, led at nothing in the market. In fact, then I corrected myself, and we led at one thing. Our customers left us at a faster rate than any other operator. I think, and in that is the genesis of both our success and how we maintain it is. The organisation is very focused on the belief that we can, if we ruthlessly go after competitive advantage, then that will drive us to change all the time. And that competitive advantage is also really important to understand what's the difference between true differentiation and neutralisation. So that if you have that lust and that hunger for competitive advantage. And let's be honest, it is a big, this is the most competitive mobile market in the entire world. Yeah. So if you don't want to compete, just get out of the kitchen, So if you have that lust for competitive advantage, then I think continuing to focus on how I can make a difference to the customer keeps us hungry. And let's be honest, we're paranoid about the fact that somebody will come and steal our lunch.
It's a great point, how do you make sure that what you're focusing on is a sustainable competitive advantage, and what is a sustainable competitive advantage these days?
Well, I don't think there is necessarily in our industry any individual sustainable competitive advantage other than a belief that in a commoditized market you can differentiate through insight and experience. Right. And we will focus relentlessly on that. And in that context, the differentiation can be a tiny thing. One of the things that we use is our gurus. Well, we have 15 million hits on our guru video clips because people see that as just a different way of engaging them in how they get the most out of their smartphone.
Yeah. Seriously, they could be tiny things. They could also be huge things as big as the Millennium Dome. I mean, that's
a pound in the swear box, by the way.
Is it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, the O2.
Correct.
Or the white elephant. No, that's what it was previously. That's £1,000.
You're struggling for the world's most successful live entertainment venue. I think that was the bit you were struggling for.
Well done. Let's talk about how did you know, because that has brought you unprecedented success. I mean, how did you guys know that was going to be as successful as you did? I mean, did you? Was it a bit of a lot of money on Red 28 or?
So I think there's two distinct elements to it. It wasn't as big a gamble as people think, and I'll come back to that. But it's fair to say that at the time, we were liberated by the fact that trying anything different was likely to have a better outcome than the things that we've been doing in the past. And that definitely helps. But the key was, when you analyse what we did is we partnered with AEG, the Anschutz Entertainment Group. We didn't buy or rent a building in North Greenwich. We partnered with the world's most successful operator of live entertainment venues. Yeah. And surprisingly enough, by focusing on and committing to the partnership and bringing to them what we believed in the partnership would make a difference is our ability to influence the experience in the site. Our brand team got involved in the design of the loos at the O2. That's the sort of focus and attention. But ultimately, we picked a partner. It's exactly the same story as our launch of the iPhone in the UK. We went out and persuaded Apple that we were the best partner to bring their technology to life for customers in the UK. So I think partnership and having the humility to recognise as a business that your best possible execution might be with a partner is a really important part of our success, and will be even more, I'm sure, going forward.
Yeah, because I'm sure you didn't want to turn your people in Slough into entertainment people and events organisers. I mean, so you outsourced, you chose the right partner.
We did.
Yeah.
We happen to have a world-class events team internally,
Right.
because we think experience, we're not in the technology business, we're in the experience business. So it is at the heart of who we are inside our business, but also picking partners who recognise that as crucial.
Yeah. We interviewed, on the experience point, we interviewed Tom Peters, and we talked to him about what branding is, and he said, your brand is your experience that people have with you. Experience is everything. You once said, and you just said it again, that we are an experience company. So can you just elaborate on that point for us?
Yeah. So, technology in itself is an enabler. What we're in the business of doing is making sure that our customers are closest to the things that matter to them, and that's the people and experiences that matter most to them. I don't want, maybe I use a parallel, maybe it's a bad parallel, but 5 years ago, if you went to Heathrow Airport, you went 5 minutes before the check-in closed, you got in, you got out the other side, you got on your plane, you got out, and by the time you landed at the other end, your experience started. BA created Terminal 5. Now, if my family is anything to go by, my daughter wants us to arrive 2 hours earlier so that that can be part of the experience. Well, I see O2's role as to be the curator of our customers' most valuable experiences, be the point of embarkation and disembarkation for everything that matters to them. That's a completely different job than building technology.
Yeah. Ronan, it's interesting because you, when you first turned up today, Ronan was fuming because he'd seen an EE billboard, right? And throughout this interview with you today, you're talking a lot about the competition. So, and it's interesting because I think you have got quite a bit of gladiatorial, thank you very much indeed, spirit about you. And just to prove that, the Independent quoted you earlier saying this earlier this year, saying our business will live and die by our customers, and then later on referring to the competition. We're more than ready to take the fight on in 2012. I'm not just looking forward to it, I'm enjoying it. Right? So from two questions in this. Number one, how important do you think it is for a CEO or a leader to have that hunger to compete and win? And secondly, asking one of the experts in the industry, what lessons do you have to share for us generally on how to win in the battleground of business?
So, look, forgive me, indulge me for a second, but I have the luxury of having the finest brand in the entire cellular industry in the world. So if I can't have the aspiration and ambition to win, then I shouldn't be doing the job. So we have fabulous assets. Our people and our brand are just unparalleled. So in that context, that's what gets me up in the morning. We can make a difference, whether it be in society with our Think Big program or whether it be to our customers. So I think for any business, you're really, really clear on what are your key assets, what are the things that you can truly differentiate on. And 90% of businesses, when challenged, will write up lots of things as differentiation, which simply aren't. So be crystal clear what it is. And I don't think there's any business in the world that succeeds without loving a fight.
Or person. Innovation, and you talked about there people, and you've also mentioned about technology. And if we can look at here, innovation and technology sometimes are quite closely linked together. And you clearly believe in innovation as a key enabler for you to get ahead, despite the fact that, as you said, it's also about people and experience. At Total Telecom's Wireless World this year, you were quoted, but if you don't remember saying any of this stuff, then I'll have to redo our
Probably
research.
because Nicola wrote it.
Yeah, that's right. They said, Ronan Dunne declared that telcos that don't deliver the innovative services their users want and need do not deserve to have successful business. And it goes on to say, if we are out-innovated by competitors, we have no right to succeed. It's as simple as that. So what advice do you have for us about how to make sure our companies are continuously innovating and to win that game of innovation?
So the first thing is, I did say that, and I completely agree with it. I think the key is, let me use an example maybe that brings it to life. In the last couple of years, the telco sector has been awash with concerns about, are we going to be overtaken by the over-the-top players? Are they going to come and steal our lunch? Turn that around. If you're driven by insight and the desire to innovate on behalf of your customers, what that says to me is there's a service or an experience that customers are interested in the telco space that I'm not offering. So my response to that is, we went to California, we bought ourselves a voice over IP company and integrated that into our capability. We didn't, and we don't, block IP services on our network. Some of our competitors may do, because we want to embrace what our customers truly value and make sure that we can add value in how we deliver it. So I think, again, for any business is really understand, if there's a threat out there, is it because you're not responding to the customer insight and the customer need? And I think for us that's quite liberating. You know, there's an awful lot of telcos in the world who think that VoIP is the devil incarnate, you know? As opposed to, it's something my customers are asking me to provide, and if I don't, they'll go somewhere else. That's another example for me of step back from it and just look at what the facts are. It's actually very clear insight.
It's interesting because my wife last night, she's from Mauritius, she lives in this country now, thank goodness. Long distance. But her father still lives in Mauritius, and she was saying to me last night, she said, look, I've got Skype on my handset, I can make free calls to Mauritius because he's got Skype. Does that, you were just talking about VoIP there, but does that type of thing, should that scare operators, or is there something that, is there ways that you could generate money out of that? I was trying to work.
So, in our case, in Telefonica, we have an offering called To Me, which does exactly the same thing, and we will incorporate more and more of that capability, including video capability, into the services we offer to our customers. I think what's clear is that simple connectivity is and should be available to all on a very low cost model. Yeah. What brands like ours have to do is identify where are the areas and opportunities for us to add really incremental value to the value of membership. At the end of the day, O2 is a club, and people get value out of membership. That's why, for example, O2 Wi-Fi, which is the second largest Wi-Fi network in Britain, is open to everybody. It's an opportunity for people to see how good Wi-Fi can be if it's done well, and through that introduce them to the brand, which also does other things, whether it be priority tickets. 100,000 of our customers got first in line for Michael Bublé. Now, the truth is, I might not stand in line for Michael Bublé, but 100,000 of our customers got first in line for Michael Bublé concerts. Right. That's the sort of thing that's the value of membership. And again, it goes back to, if you're going to be clear in your business what your purpose is, you will start to respond to what the customer sees as real value and not waste time and money just replicating things that they could do themselves or even do better themselves.
Seriously, that experience even comes. We were going to talk about the sort of the network outage a little bit later and how sort of you dealt with that crisis, but purely from a sort of experience, brand, social media perspective. You know, that seemed to be very important to you, and you guys dealt with it very well from a social media perspective, people understand. It says here, the Daily Telegraph said that you were basically, it was a masterclass in social media, and O2, quote, O2 responded with witty messages that made their customers giggle and lightened the overall mood of the whole disaster. Matt Saunders, which is one of the customers, said, who's obviously an advocate, said, why is O2 responding to offensive tweets? Just ignore them, O2. To which the O2 UK team responded with, they're not so bad. Sometimes all they need is a bit of care and attention. Tell us, if you can, about how that branding, that sort of social media thing can come across at every touch point of a customer, whether it's going to the O2, not the Millennium Dome, or whether it's dealing with a time of crisis like that. How do you make sure that you're on brand all the time, everywhere?
Well, it's interesting. Somebody a lot cleverer than me said culture is what happens when nobody's watching. Our values in the business are bold, open, trusted, and clear. And on the moment of a crisis, people align to their values and they behave in that way. And so our social media response, of course, we have people trained in social media, but was the natural response of people who are clearly aligned with the brand. The first thing to say, as I did at the time, is we screwed up and we let our customers down. But we didn't faff about. We stood up and we said it. And if there is one thing about leadership, is take one step forward, stand up, be clear. The only place you can lead from is the front. Yeah. So we got on TV, and I personally said, we screwed up. It shouldn't have happened. And I spoke directly to not the journalists, but to the customers and to our staff in every part of the business who wanted to understand why this had happened and what we were going to do about it. And the guys on the social and girls on the social media team just responded in the same vein, and they really responded in a way that says, this does matter to us, and despite the fact that some of you have maybe lost a little bit of perspective about this, we're going to respond in a very O2 way. And I don't think there's any crisis planning you can do that allows people to respond authentically if they don't believe in that themselves every day when they turn up to work.
It's one of the things I did notice, though, watching you in those media interviews. I think it was the same day or the day after. It was fast. So how important was the speed to which you responded?
Speed is vitally important. And look, if I take lessons from that, is one of the challenges that I think any business has is how do you demonstrate that the communication channel is open when you actually have no new news? Because that is a real challenge. Right. So for the first X hours, I simply did not know what had caused. And the customers wanted to know three things. What's happened? Why did it happen? And what the blank blank are you going to do about it? And when I couldn't answer the what happened, it was very difficult. And so there was a few hours where we were updating, but essentially the update was the same as the update an hour earlier. And what people didn't realize was we were checking in regularly and doing that. So that's definitely both a challenge and a learning, is how do you communicate no news in a way that reassures people that you're still actively communicating. But fast, we have a process that all major businesses will have, but we declared a P0, which is a major incident, within a half an hour, realizing that this could be big. And as a result, we then initiated all of our procedures around that, whether it be the social media and the comms teams, but our engineering team. We had 250 people on that issue within an hour. So it's being well prepared and then being decisive. And then it goes back to it again, and then communicate. Because once we went out and people said, okay, I understand it, and let's be honest with it, and forgive my thing is, but people know in technology that stuff happens. That's not an excuse, but it is a reality. And most of our customers would prefer us to continue to pioneer and innovate than to stand back and be risk averse. So they know that's part of the relationship with O2. But please just keep me on side. Tell me what's going on. Explain to me what you've done, what you're going to do about it. And more recently, we've gone out and said the particular piece of the network that caused that incident, we've now removed from the network because we're not prepared to take the risk of letting our customers down again.
From a leadership perspective, they always say you've got to stay calm during a crisis. You did stay calm. Were you calm on the inside? Presumably.
Was I calm on the inside? I think one of the real qualities of leadership is, authenticity, and I'm not the first to say it. But for me, that means being the same person inside the office, outside the office, in a crisis, not in a crisis. It's just that being real. Yeah. So the real me is that same person. I do not, for good or ill, I do not lie awake at night and worry about anything. Because I spend all my time during the day doing what I can to influence the outcome. So when I get home in the evening, I've done whatever I can, so I sleep peacefully in my bed. That night, I didn't go to bed. I stayed up and I communicated with our network team, with my CTO, and with my shareholders in Madrid. And my boss didn't sleep either, because every time I sent him an email update, he was on 30 seconds later. To be clear, in an extremely supportive way. But that particular night, we just decided we'd do the 24 hours. And actually, without sounding trite about it, stand in the shoes of our customers who were there sitting, waiting, saying, what's going to happen?
Absolutely. That was phenomenal. Who would have thought we'd had a workshop as to how to sleep better at night? So it wasn't even on the agenda for today. You see? So if we can just go back then to execution for a second. I mean, we've talked about innovation. You're passionate about innovation, but it's all about, as you know, it's all about execution. On Harvard Business Review, their website on hbr.org, Michael Jarrett, the INSEAD professor, obviously a smart guy, points out that over 70% of corporate strategic initiatives are never successfully implemented. And then Larry Bossidy, the former CEO of Allied Signal, he wrote a whole book on execution, and it's quite unfortunate, but on the front cover of the book, it's just got the word execution. So if you're reading that on the train, you can really scare some people. But it says in there, and he says that strategies most often fail because they aren't well executed. It's all about execution. So we've talked about innovation. What tips can you share on how to outperform the competition by the good old results and delivering on what you need to do?
So I think 3 thoughts. Ready, aim, fire is always better than ready, fire, aim. But businesses who want to react, want to execute, tend to break out of the starting blocks before the firing gun. Yeah. So it's always better to spend time at the front, being really clear where it is you're trying to get to in a hurry. My mother used to say to me when I was a kid, the more hurry, the less speed. It's an old expression. That's the first thing. The second thing is, every big challenge can be broken down into small challenges. And guess what? We're much better at doing small challenges than we are at big. So no matter how transformational it is, break it down into bite-sized chunks. You'll be pleasantly surprised how much more people can absorb and more particularly get their arms around what it is you're asking of them. And the third thing is, if you have 3 big priorities, you've at least one too many and possibly 2.
Right, okay, good. And from an individual perspective, how do you make sure you know what your priorities really are? I mean, like, let's just say, you know, your priorities, for example. How do you identify where to spend your time and your priorities? Because you could have, as you said, setting the vision, communication, the crisis going on with, or wars going on with the network outage. How do you decide where do you decide to spend your time? I mean, is it?
Well, it's interesting. As a practice, I actually sit at the beginning of every quarter with the guy who runs my office for me, and we set out what we call my non-BAU priorities. And essentially what I try and do is think about the things that my colleagues aren't currently thinking about because they're rightly thinking about the priority I gave them yesterday. So it's trying to be 1 quarter, 1 year ahead. What are the evolving themes? So one of the biggest ones for me in the last year has been around the problem of youth engagement. So you might say it's got nothing to do with my business, but I committed to spend 20% of my time, 1 day a week in 2012 on youth engagement. Why? Very simple reason. If we do not address the challenge of this lost generation, this 1 million in the UK, 5 million across Europe, then every business plan, you know that 5-year business plan we talked about earlier? Well, that 5-year business plan assumes that those young people are active participants in the economy and are consuming our products and services. If we don't address that issue today, I can tell you every single one of us will miss our business plan in the future. So that for me is a good example of that's something that I can do. And the other thing that's really liberating, I think, for me in the way I lead is everybody around my table on the board can do their job better than I can. So there's no confusion about where I should spend my time. What I do is influence. It's a little touch on the tiller, a little support, reaffirmation, but consistency of this is what our purpose is and ensuring that each of the people around the team understands how they can best contribute to doing that. But I never ever try to do their job. But what I try to do is look out for them on the basis that if I look a bit further forward, when they have their heads down delivering, then I can make sure that they don't bump into anything.
So leaders generate leaders, right? And that's exactly what you are doing. We've got quite a few learning and development and organizational development people in the room. So if we can just ask,
I'm in trouble, so.
Yeah, that's right. How do you generate leaders at O2?
Well, again, I'm not a great one for the leadership books or the organizational books, so forgive me. I just, again, look, I am an accountant by profession. I shouldn't hide it. So I'm quite fact-based. Okay. You know, I love brands and people and other things, but I quite like to agree the facts rather than debate the facts. So when we're looking at organization, other things, creating leaders, I just ask myself is what operating model or organizational model will best align us to the purpose that we've defined, to the vision that we have, and how do I create the space for people to be successful? It goes back to my original comment, for people to be the success they deserve to be. And out of that, I think, come 3 things. You need to be ruthless about quality. And you'll forgive me, but I went to the States one time and somebody in a very, very large organization said about recruitment, better a hole than an arsehole. And I think, in a very American way, that sums it up beautifully. So you need to be ruthless about quality, because if somebody's not contributing, they're drawing from everybody else in a way that's preventing those other people from being a success. And the other thing is ask for forgiveness, not permission. Judgment is a thing that probably everybody would describe as, and that's a quality that you look for in people who are going to be successful. Actually, the most important judgment, without trying to be clever with words, is judgment as to when to exercise your judgment. People with less experience tend to overreach themselves by trying to prove that they're able to make a tough decision, when perhaps wiser heads would have stepped back. But for me, it's allowing somebody to make a mistake that I know will not bring the house down, but they will learn from it, rather than me to put my hand out and say, no, it's all right, before you jump, you're going to fall. So having that confidence and that environment that allows people to fail in a supportive and nurturing environment, and let's make sure they don't ever do it again.
Right.
Because that way they will learn not to do it again.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said before about authenticity and leadership, it's like allowing these people to come in and be who they want to be. I know some people that sort of change their personality as soon as they get into the office because that's what their boss thinks they should see.
And I think that's an absolute scourge. It goes back to this comment about behaviour and technology, is we've left the behavioural change way behind, and that's the biggest thing that's holding it back. One of my proudest contributions in the last 5 years is that I've watched my daughter play hockey in every competitive match she's played during the day, during the working day, because I think that's the same shadow of a leader that says it's output-based, not inputs-based, that I want people to be authentic in work, that they are family people, that they can come to work and be dad or daughter or son or mother. That's massively, massively important.
Which leads us very nicely on to our last topic before we open it up for the audience, and that is flexible working.
Yes.
This work-life balance. Jack Welch points out that in China, people don't even know what that term work-life balance is. So, that's potentially a concern. However, I know, having been interviewing you for the last 35, 40 minutes, you wouldn't do things unless they had real value to the organization. So some people think that flexible working and all these things can be seen as quite fluffy. But, you have been pioneering, as I mentioned, in flexible working. And on Personal Today, it says, on February the 2nd, O2 asked the entire workforce at its head office in Slough to work away from the office for that day. Around 2,500 employees participated in the pilot, operating remotely. O2's aim was to push the boundaries of what is possible through flexible working. It then goes on to say that there's only one person that didn't get the memo that day, and so he turned up to work, which is a pretty good result, I'd have thought. So, what was that experiment? What did we learn from that? And Ronan, why is that so high on your agenda?
So, for us as a business, being able to engage enterprise customers in the private or public sector about how they can work smartly, enabled by technology, has a huge business purpose for us. But there's a bigger purpose to this as well. And again, it's not like I've laid these stones out so I can show that there's a path, but there is a path which says that if you're going to create the conditions for people to be the success they deserve to be, you have to create the environment in which they can be their most effective. And slaving people to the desk 9 to 5 may work brilliantly for some, but it won't necessarily be the best way for everyone. And our flexible working is not about, when I have a duvet day and I just don't tell anybody about it. Our flexible working is, how do you best achieve? So a working mum who'd much prefer to avoid getting snarled in the rush hour traffic because she can only leave the kids at 8:10 because that's when the gates of the school open. Why would I waste an hour and a half of the valuable time of one of my colleagues by forcing her to be in the traffic every single day? Instead of saying, I'll tell you what, why don't you go straight home after that and you can drive in at 11 o'clock, or if you don't need to be in the office that day. So I think there's a real model there about how people can be more effective. So what we did was we used the excuse, for want of a better word, of the Olympics and the fact that Dorney Lake was being used for the Olympic rowing to say, guys, we need to prepare for the summer because, it could be chaos. And let's be honest, every employer was being scared by, London Transport and others to say it will be chaos. And of course, we know it wasn't. But we didn't necessarily believe it would be, but we thought, what a fantastic opportunity to galvanise the whole organisation around it. So it was the biggest trial of its kind. We closed down the office. We had 10 people, skeleton staff in, and everybody else worked differently. And what we did is, and the beauty of technology, I can actually give you the facts rather than the sentiment of it, because all of our people connect to our network, and so we can see whether or not they're working or whether they're active and whatever else. And then we surveyed people afterwards, and what we found was that on average people saved an hour and a quarter in the day, whether it was commute time or wasted time, and about 60% of that time was reinvested back in the business through higher productivity, more time, and about 40% was shed between, about 15% of it was people stayed in bed a little longer, and the other 25% was better quality time with families. Productivity, as surveyed, actually went up. And since that intervention, we have continued relentlessly with that program. From a cost point of view, I can save myself £5 million a year. Now, we're a big business, but who wouldn't get out of bed for 5 million quid? I can save myself £5 million a year by allowing my people to work more effectively. Why would that be a difficult thing? But the challenge is, it's behaviour. Because if the boss says, I want you to be in the office at 8 o'clock for that meeting, you will be in the office. If the boss's PA, and let's be honest about it, if you haven't discovered it already, the power in every organisation rests with the PAs. So if your PA puts that meeting in with the dial-in details, it automatically gives everybody who's on that invitation not just the right, but the opportunity to work around that, work it flexibly and dial in. So it's about driving those sort of key behaviours that liberates. We have people in the organisation, there's one particular meeting, there's a team that's dispersed around the country, and they will save £10,000, that one team, on one monthly meeting, just by simply having it as a virtual meeting for 10 of the times and making a celebration of the 2 of the 12 times a year where they all come together.
Excellent. So as you said, it's a financial benefit, but also there's a major talent benefit.
Absolutely.
But I suppose, because the first thing I think of when I think of flexible working, I think that I would hate it personally, just because I would get distracted by the fridge. I also like to go to work to get energized by the people around me. But as you said, it's not for everybody. So it's whatever that person's best output environment would be, you'd allow them to.
Absolutely, and what we find for most people is they want the blend because they like the variety and they like the flexibility. It's not that I used to come to work and now I stay at home. It's Tuesdays and Thursdays I stay at home and I can get work done, and Monday, Wednesday and Friday I go in. Or you know what? I now go to the office at 11 o'clock and avoid the traffic and come home at 7 rather than go in at 7:30 to try and get a car parking spot. And try and then get home at 5 in the middle of the rush hour. So I think it's a genuine win-win. I had the opportunity to speak to some of the staff in the Cabinet Office in a workshop that we did a couple of weeks ago, and I think in the way services are provided, that flexibility, So customer service staff, well, of course they have to be in a customer service call centre. No, they don't. They can work in a virtual call centre and work from home. Our gurus, yes, we have some in our retail stores, but they can be on the end of a phone, or you know what? Somebody can raise a query and we can upload, as we do, we can upload a video response and send that to them. So it also liberates people to innovate in the way businesses work as well as individuals work. And I think that's the exciting thing about all of this. It's not just how the individual works, but it liberates businesses to transform how they work.
Yeah. It's interesting, you're not just innovating on products and services, but in all the areas of your business, right?
We try.
Excellent. Okay, I think that ends the interview. Now for any questions from the floor. Thank you, Ronan, for that. Any questions? Question here, sir. Thank you.
Ronan, Derek Tree from the Influence Company. What have you had to do as a CEO transitioning from BT to O2 brand to actually have your people really embrace customer values?
So let me not reflect on BT. I think 2 or 3 things. I talked about purpose. Most organisations think, we need to have an organisation purpose, and maybe the CEO has a purpose. Every single individual in the organisation needs to be able to understand for themselves personally the simple question, why O2? Why do I get up in the morning and come to work? We have a passion about engaging customers in the opportunity and possibilities of technology. But what does that actually mean to the person who comes into a retail store in the morning or comes in? And there's a couple of things. They admire who we are and what we stand for as a brand. They admire our corporate and social responsibility. They are hugely engaged in volunteering with us. So very much we have in our company people who are in love with the brand, and I mean that, who absolutely love the brand. The challenge for me is to make sure that they stay in love with the company, because at the end of the day, unlike most, we're a brand first with a company behind. I think most organizations make the mistake of being a company first with a brand that sits somewhere in the drawer. I said it earlier to Anthony, that dinner party question, I would say with confidence that 11,000 colleagues are more than happy to answer the question, who do you work for? I think if every organisation tested themselves on that, they'd be a long way on the journey of how you really engage your employees.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ronan. Down here, Saya, please.
Thanks. Hello. Guy Granger from Jones Lang LaSalle. You talked about communication being the key, but with thousands of staff, how do you find it best as a CEO to communicate with your staff when you're not by the water cooler or whatever it is? I mean, email is the most sort of abused form of communication, but do you trial lots of different ways of communication to your staff?
So we use lots of channels. I think the challenge is if the communications link is long, you've probably made a mistake. The thing that influences people is the people closest to them. So if my communication to my team gives them absolute clarity of what our purpose and what our objectives are and what our priorities are for the next while, and they follow on that conversation in their own style with their people, that cascade of key elements, the frame in which the dialogue happens, is critical. Then you can colour in that frame with more broad-based communications. So a good example is we had our results on, what day are we today, Thursday? Yeah, yesterday, Wednesday, sorry, it's been one of those weeks. So my CEO and myself stood up in the atrium and in front of 600 people, gave them an update on the health of the business. But one of my colleagues in the team went to every single site that we have and did exactly the same. So if you've given that frame, that people understand their context because of the person they report to, their supervisor, their manager, then I think you can use more, not quite broadcast channels, but broader channels to then fill in the colour. Where we engage people in the two-way is we have a people forum, which is very important, but we also use Yammer extensively. And I and colleagues will engage one-to-one on Yammer. It is not a management communications tool. It is a communications tool that is felt to be owned by everybody in the business. So people in the retail store will be saying, so why again do we not do unlimited data? I've had 3 people who come in today and said, unlimited data, but because we didn't, they went to 3. Well then, I can go on that and I can just summarise exactly why. And it's very clear, we want to give the best experience to the broadest number of people. And anyone who offers unlimited data can't make that promise and actually back it up. That simple intervention allows that person to have a conversation in the retail store the next day with the confidence to say, I know exactly why you're going to ask me that, and I know exactly why we do it this way. You know, that type of communication, I think, then augments from a, individuals feeling part of the larger picture. So it's those 3 frames. The one-by-one cascade down within teams and small groups creates the frame. Broader communications channels then fill in the colour, and then two-way channels like a Yammer can then add the detail that individuals need. Does that make sense?
Hi, I'm Laura McCracken from the Ashton Partnership. I love your fighting spirit, your competitiveness, and also your willingness to partner with people who have competitive or complementary skills, and that's great. I'm actually quite curious about your partnership with Weave, which is the partnership with your 2 key competitors, Everything Everywhere and Vodafone. How do you have that same kind of leadership and spirit pushing forward and driving forward that mobile commerce platform that you've created?
So really good question. I think for those of you who aren't familiar, so ourselves, Vodafone and Everything Everywhere, following EU clearance, have set up a mobile commerce platform, mobile media platform for the industry, built out of a simple insight that there was an opportunity there that if I went alone, and I had the largest market share of mobile media and was ahead in a number of other things, I risked losing on behalf of my customers to the Googles, the Facebooks, and others of this world. So I took a very, very pragmatic view and said, if we as operators can work together, we can create the scale and relevance that means we'll bring greater value to our customers and therefore to us than simply allowing someone else to do it. So quite pragmatic approach. And I was saying just before we started, we have a joint venture with Vodafone to build out our 4G network. And again, 5 years ago, we would probably have spat at each other sooner than do that. But the harsh reality is customers don't buy 4G, they buy the experience that it enables. Nobody walks into my store and says, because you have a blue tower versus a red tower, I'm going to buy your service. Understanding what really matters, what customers truly value, allows you to cooperate and collaborate. And it's the classic cooperation model for me. It's cooperate, getting to market, and then beat the hell out of each other at the competitive interface to make a difference that customers truly value.
Ronan, thank you very much indeed, sir, for your time today. It's been an absolute honour. We've got some great insights from all around the business and leadership. So on behalf of all of us, thank you so very much indeed.
Thank you.